This is an idiot's guide to understanding how to play Overwatch. These are my stats from Season 11 Overwatch 2 when I first started playing on PC, and these are my current stats in Season 20. In this video, I'm going to be teaching you how I turned from an idiot into a genius. I'll be doing this by teaching you the mindset that every winner and pro player has in Overwatch, actually helping you understand what actually needs to happen in order for you to get the victory on your screen, and just a couple of key skills that you need to learn and practice in order to actually get good enough to win games. Okay, first, I want to just take you through the mindset quickly. So the first thing that I want to talk about is tilting. Now, you probably understand tilt as, getting angry or frustrated or whatever sort of negative emotion that you associate with this word. I'm here to tell you this is all completely incorrect. Tilting isn't necessarily you getting angry. Getting angry or upset or like emotional is a part of getting tilted. But being tilted, in my definition, I'm going to redefine tilt. Getting tilted is simply losing focus, okay? Now, the reason why it's this specifically, because the way we're going to improve our Overwatch is by having things to focus on, right? And then we're going to keep working on them. So you can imagine, if we lose focus on the thing we're trying to focus on, well, we're not really going to make any progress. And that is what I'm going to call tilt, okay? Now, tilting does include being angry, being annoyed, right? Annoyed, angry. It includes our ego getting in the way. It includes getting fatigued, even like when we get tired, it gets harder to actually think straight. Arguing with other people counts as tilting because we're losing focus from our goal. All of these things are like kind of all of these things are like different things that can happen to you, but they all lead to the same result. Having all of these things happen to you, even like separately, all of them lead to the same result. You tilt, or aka you lose focus. Okay, so that's tilting. Now, how can we prevent tilting? Well, it's kind of hard to prevent tilting, especially the longer you play, and like that is one way you can prevent tilting. You have shorter play sessions. Me personally, I have 3-hour sessions because that's how long I can generally focus for, as long as I'm actually like doing the session correctly. But other ways to prevent tilt are considering leaving voice chat and text chat, because for me personally, I don't really have a lot of I've never really had a lot of value from them. Me personally, I fully turn off text chat. I don't use it anymore, and I don't really like to have VC on by default. But if you want VC on by default, then that gives you that leaves you with 3 options. Okay, so number 1, it's good, it's positive. People are coming. It's a good time, even if it's a bit of a distraction from what you're trying to focus on. It's fine. The second option is it's neutral, no one's speaking, so having it off or on doesn't really matter. And then the third option is if it's negative, people are being toxic, they're flaming. All of this emotional stuff is going to take you away from your focus, which means we're not going to be able to actually properly improve. So these two are fine. This one, if you see that people are being toxic, just leave. This is why I just have them off by default. Another way to prevent tilting is make your focus way more obvious. So, for example, above my monitor, let me draw a little stand here, right? Above my monitor, I've got a big whiteboard. Obviously, I have things written down on them, but when I'm playing, I put down, X, so, focus on my cover usage or whatever, right? I have that written above me, so every time I look up, it's a constant reminder, oh yeah, this is what I'm focusing on, right? Because then it's like, well, how can I not focus on it if it's right in front of my face? If you don't have a whiteboard, for example, you can use your phone on the side with like the focus on it. You can use a post-it note, stick it on the wall somewhere, or stick it on your computer. There's a bunch of different ways you can just have it in front of you. That's the important part. You need to have it written out visually in front of you so that it's really hard to forget. Okay, so that was just 2 ways to prevent tilting. Like I said, there's not a lot you can do to prevent tilting, because tilting, obviously, it's very mentally challenging and very mentally exhausting. So you're not going to be able to focus forever. It's like expecting yourself to be able to maintain a genuine like 8-hour weightlifting session. It's just not possible because you just don't have the energy to do that. It's not your fault. It's just how we're built. But what we can do is mitigate the effects of tilting. And before we get into the methods here, I want you to understand like why does tilting happen and like when does it happen? Because like knowing what it is all good, but you know, without knowing why, it doesn't really matter. So why it still happens is something that I've come up with, which is called the plate analogy. Okay, imagine that you are holding a plate. I don't really know how to draw, so this is going to be a hand. Okay, and you're going to deal with it. Okay, so this is your arm. Okay, and the arm is just us, like as like our brain. Okay, and our arm is holding a plate, and this plate is our focus or our attention or our energy, like whatever you like have in your head as like focusing on a certain thing. And on top of that plate is a cup. Now this cup is your gameplay. Okay, and whether or not the cup has something in it doesn't really matter. The cup is made of glass, and if the glass falls, GG, the gameplay's over. So the plate analogy entails, okay, we need to stay focused on whatever we're focusing on. Let's just stick with cover, okay? So us need to stay focused on the focus, which is cover. That way our gameplay can be actually helpful and useful in order to learn. Because the more we're focused on cover, you know, every like minute or every like 10 seconds, right, we're gaining, you know, 1 XP in this skill. We're gaining 1 XP. And the more XP we gain, the more we're going to level up the skill. However, what happens is that eventually you're going to get tired, you know, maybe you get fatigued, you know, I mean, these two mean the same thing, but you know what I mean, right? You get tired, you get fatigued, maybe you get angry. Maybe instead of focusing on cover usage, your ego starts to come in because you want to win this game. So you start making choices and you start thinking about other things that aren't cover. Maybe you are arguing with people, and this is going to draw your focus away from cover. And as your mind comes away from the focus, or should I say, because we have stopped focusing, our arm or our hand is going to begin to droop a little bit. That's a bad drawing, okay? Our hand droops a little bit. Nothing crazy, but it's, you know, it droops. For sure, you know, you can see a noticeable droop. We're still holding up the plate and the cup. It's just barely standing, but it's drooping and we're dropping focus. Here is when you like need to kind of understand what are you thinking, how are you feeling at this moment. Okay, if you can recognize how you're feeling in this moment, whether it's this or something else, this is really good, because if you can see this and stop yourself from playing, you are going to save yourself a lot of time, a lot of hardship, a lot of kind of frustration you might have with the game, because you're going to stop yourself from dropping the cup. Okay, and like some thoughts might be, you know, oh man, my tank is useless, you know, what the fuck am I doing? And like that's a bad thought as well, right? Because you're not thinking about the focus, right? You know, thoughts like these, if you can recognize these thoughts and feelings and stop before you fully drop the plate, and then the cup crashes down and breaks, that's really good. And obviously what happens when you fully lose focus, then your hand drops or it slips, and then the plate obviously can no longer hold up the cup because it's not, you know, flat. The cup drops, and the gameplay's over. The session is basically inert. You're not going to be making any progress. So that's the plate analogy. And it's going to help you to kind of feel when you're on the verge of tilting, or like when you begin tilting. But some other methods to mitigate tilting that are a little less you know, mental and psychological is, you know, very, very simple practical stuff we can do. Okay, so we can have breaks after each game, because this is going to allow our mind to declutter so that we can focus back on our focus, right? It's going to stave off the feeling of frustration or whatever if we have a little break. Same thing with just drinking some water, doing like having a short walk, getting sunlight, talking to people. Basically, you want, like, if it's like a scale, okay? So in the middle, you have your focus. You know, you're perfectly aligned. You know, you're perfectly aligned to what you need to be. On the left, you have fully tilted. Okay, this is where you're playing the game, but you're not thinking about playing the game. You're just playing the game because you're angry and you don't, like, you're just mad. Over here, we have, you know, just regular outside of Overwatch stuff. Okay. When we're playing Overwatch, we want to be here and not over here. But if we find ourselves getting closer and closer to tilting, we're going to stop a minute, recalibrate so that we can be closer to this regular life. So we're not thinking about the game, but like we're not thinking about our focus as well. But you know, we're thinking about good things. We're focused on other things. Regulate with your real life over here, and then after like a 30-minute break, you can come back and recalibrate on the focus because you're no longer going to be all mind fucked with like all of the negative thoughts over here, right? Another way to mitigate tilt as well is having someone like watching you play, like kind of specifically someone who's trying to live coach you, because unless you're an absolute weirdo, okay, you are not gonna baby rage when you have someone who's sat there trying to help you. So I think live coaching is actually really good at keeping you focused because the coach is most likely also going to be trying to help you to ask yourself questions and stay focused on whatever it is you're focusing on. So if you can be bothered with that, or like if like you can afford it and you want to, I highly recommend finding someone who can live coach you because it's going to be really good, one, to avoid tilting, but also I think live coaching is really good if you do it correctly. But that's a topic for another day. And just the last thing. People have like asked me before, Kai, how do I stop tilting? And I'm always like, you can't stop. Because my definition of tilting, remember, is losing focus on whatever is important to you. And you're not going to be able to stop losing focus because we are not infinite energy machines. If we were, we would probably be focused on different things other than getting a little funny rank in a video game. But because we're human beings, because we have limited energy, we can't stop ourselves from tilting, but we can mitigate the effects and try to prevent it for as long as possible, which is going to help us save our sanity, because we're not going to be getting upset as often, and it's going to save our elo, which is going to save our ego, because if we play games whilst we're tilted, we're going to go down. If we don't play games whilst we're tilted, we're going to stay the same, but we're not going to lose elo. So we can't stop tilting, but we can do our best to work around it. Okay, the next mindset I have is fail, fail, fail. And it's one that I've came up recently, and it's one that I actually talk about inside of my Overwatch Mastery course. So instead of playing very passive and not really wanting to do things, we need to turn from passive players into aggressive players. And I don't necessarily mean, okay, we're just going to jump in 1v5 and feed. You can do that if you feel like there's something to gain there, which there is, right? If you jump in 1v5, you can learn a lot of things very quickly and understand, okay, I shouldn't jump in 1v5 at this time from this angle. Like, you'll learn different reasons and like different ways to change your gameplay because you're being aggressive, right? So like, even though I wouldn't advocate for it, you can literally do the biggest feed and go in 1v5 as Winston and you can still learn something. So instead of playing too passive, I don't want you to play too aggressive, but if you want, go for it. Play aggressive enough to where you're going to be making consistent but correctable mistakes. Because what we want is we want to play aggressive, right? We want to have the action or the aggressiveness, whatever, and we want to do this frequently enough so that we can get a frequent amount of consequences, which then we can turn into lessons, which is going to drive our next action, which will then produce either the same result, which means we need to do something different, or it's going to produce a different result, which is going to produce a different lesson, and then we've learned, right? That like that's the cycle. But that's only going to happen if we actually play aggressive enough in order to trigger that cycle. So yeah, basically, fail is it's just about really getting yourself in the mindset that, okay, we want to actually make as many mistakes as possible. Because if we sit in the back of the map as Anna and we're so far back that we can't do reliable damage, we can't use our cooldowns well, we can't even nano people well, yeah, sure, we might look good and it might help our ego because we're going to have nice stats. We're going to have like okay kills, low deaths, maybe a decent amount of damage, really good healing, but we're not actually going to win the game, right? So fail, it's a way of, like, it doesn't protect our ego, but it helps us in the long term because it's going to push us to actually play in a way that forces us to make frequent mistakes so that we can learn from it. Which is why I've got fail, because it's like, okay, I failed once, learn, fail again, learn, learn. And like, I've got a small framework for you, right? So it's really simple. Your mind is going to get blown. You're going to think it's so dumb, but it's also so unbelievably smart that your brain is going to expand, okay? Watch this. So, first, we have an action, okay? And we are going to do more of these if we are more aggressive, which is good, okay? So, an action is going to lead to a consequence due to some sort of Newton's law. I think it's Newton's third law. Every action must have an equal and opposite reaction. The same thing is true in Overwatch. Okay, everything we do, every time we rotate, every time we take an off angle, every time we use a cooldown in a certain way, every time we shoot a person, right? It's going to lead to a consequence, a reaction. A consequence could be the support heals the tank that you shot. You take an off angle, a person moves because they don't want to get shot, right? And these are positive consequences, but there can also be negative consequences. Mostly, you know, we would like positive consequences, but we're probably going to get a lot of these, which is fine because this leads on to the third part of the framework, which is learning, okay? So we take an action, a consequence happens, and we learn from the consequence. What do we specifically learn? Just anything that is going to help us understand how to either do the action less because you don't want to do the action that led to a certain consequence, or learning how to do the action better. So I'll write here. So we either want to learn how to do it less or how to do the action better. And then guess what? The L goes down here, A, C, L, and it's a constant loop. Now you can imagine if we play passive, okay, we will take in a 10-minute game, let's just say 20 actions, okay? We'll take 20 actions in a 10-minute game if we're a passive player. If we're an aggressive player, in the same amount of time, we'll take, 50 actions, right? We're taking over double the amount of actions as a passive player. And what do you think this is going to do, right? We get 50 actions, we get 50 consequences, and then we get 50 lessons. Now, this isn't going to be as, obscene in a normal game. You'll take maybe, it's really hard to say, but let's say cooldowns, for example. Your average Ana player might use your cooldown maybe 1 or 2 times every 30 seconds or every 40 seconds, right? A passive player anyway. An aggressive Ana player may use their nade 2 to 4 times per 40 seconds, right? So then they're going to get double the feedback, but also they're probably just going to get double the value because they're using cooldowns, right? So it's really important that we kind of instill the mindset in us to be more aggressive so that we can fail, so that we can learn. Because learning is how we're going to be understanding how to do things less that are bad for us or how to do things more and better. I should probably put that in as well, right? We either want to do an action less, better, or do more of a specific action, and we're only going to be able to do that if we learn. The next mindset I just want to instill in you. This one should be a bit quicker. Your rank is fake. Your rank doesn't actually mean anything. And I know this is probably a surprise because you're watching this to learn how to play better to rank up. But I'm here to tell you, your rank is fake. This is for kind of 3 main reasons. Okay. So reason number 1 is lag. Now, what do I mean by lag? Is let me draw a chart, right? And we have your skill level over time. So after you watch this video, which is at 0, because I'm a really good YouTuber and I'm really good at giving out advice and I'm going to be teaching you exactly how to get better, your skill level might look something like this, okay? And then over, 30 days, you have gone up 100%. Very, very arbitrary numbers, but that's it, okay? So over 100 days, or over 30 days, your skill level has gone up very much because you've improved. However, your rank is not going to do the same thing. Your rank is going to look something like, okay, we're kind of getting better. Maybe we're going up a bit. Oh, we dipped a bit. Okay, we're getting better. Okay, we're going, no, okay, then we dip again. Oh, now we've hit the rank, right? You can see how it's a lot slower, right? And it lags behind our actual skill improvement, which I'll try and draw it here so it goes like, let me get a different color. So it makes more sense. So, right, we go this, and then, boom, boom, maybe it even goes above our skill level for a bit, but then it goes down, and then eventually it kind of connects with our skill. So that's reason number 1, why your rank is fake, because it kind of lags behind the progress you make. Reason number 2, And that is a different red. No, I'm pretty sure that's a different red compared to the one I was using. Oh, it is. Interesting. Okay. Number 2 is that. Okay. Also, there is only 2 reasons. I'm not sure where I got the third one from. So number 2 is that sometimes you are just going to D rank, and that is just going to happen. Let me make a new page. Sometimes you are just going to D rank. Okay. And I'm not saying this because, you know, you just D rank and you lose games. I'm specifically saying this as you're trying to improve, because you're learning and you're taking in information and you're focusing on something. As you try to improve, you know, your focus, which we'll call F, you're putting a lot of mental energy into this. And a lot of this mental energy used to go into your general gameplay, just how you play. But now that your focus has appeared and you're trying to improve something, the mental energy you have left for your general gameplay is going to look a little bit like this. There's a lot less, which means, you know, 90% of your gameplay is actually probably going to get a little bit worse whilst you focus on the 10% that you actually want to improve. And can you guess what happens when 90% of your gameplay is a little worse? You're going to D rank as a player, right? And it will look something like this. You'll start over here, right? This is your general gameplay, and then you'll D rank because you're focusing. And then maybe rank up a little bit because you've gotten better. And then you D-rank again. Or like maybe you stagnate. And then after you've finally been able to implement this new concept or fundamental into your gameplay, you can add it back into your general gameplay. And now that your focus is 100% back onto your gameplay, that's when you're going to start ranking up and go even further, because you needed that 10% earlier to actually break through that plateau. So main lesson is, don't worry if you D rank when you're trying to implement something, because you're going to get the Elo slingshot. And it's not because of the funny, like, oh my god, Elo slingshot incoming, because that's cringe. It's like a technical Elo slingshot, because you get worse initially, so naturally you're going to D rank, and then you get way better. So it just has to be a slingshot. Okay. And next we have small number of heroes. I'm really not going to go too in depth for this. I'm not going to argue with people. I think you should have a small number of heroes and stick to one role if you're actually serious about trying to improve. In my opinion, you should play anywhere from 1 to 4 heroes in one role, because this is how you're going to be able to like improve at the heroes and at the macro the fastest, right? The reason why you don't want to play a lot of heroes is 2 things: micro and macro. Macro is like your general understanding of like the game, the ebb and flow of the fights, the way the teams are playing Overwatch. And then micro is like the way you're playing your specific hero, right? To simplify that, macro is team play, micro is what you're specifically doing with your mouse and your keyboard, okay? And if you play multiple heroes, right, you'll be like subconsciously practicing the micro on these heroes, but you're also going to have to learn how the macro affects all of these individual heroes. So if you play 9 heroes compared to like 2 heroes, you as a player are going to improve a lot faster if you just play these 2 heroes. Because of this, you're going to only have to improve 2 people's macro, and the macro is going to be easier to implement because you're playing less heroes compared to a person's 9 heroes where they're trying to like mentally overload themselves with playing all these heroes. And obviously, when you play less heroes, you're going to be more capable of adapting to the harsher situations of your heroes, which is actually how you're going to improve at the game. Okay, now I'm going to talk about how do you actually win in Overwatch. Like what do you need to do to win? And obviously, the way you win in Overwatch is you kill everyone and you just win the game. I mean, kind of, but Overwatch is an objective-based game. As you can see on the top, it says defend objective. Now, understanding this, it's really simple, but it's really important. You need to understand that the attackers have to capture the objective, and the defenders have to stop the attackers from taking the objective. This is the same in every mode. Obviously, in mirrored maps, it starts off neutral, where both teams are technically the attackers, right? But generally, you have the attacking team that wants to take the objective, and the defending team that wants to stop that. Why? Because the team who does that better is going to win the game, naturally, right? If the blue team full holds the yellow team here, right? They don't let them cap, and then they swap sides, and then the blue team attacks and they capture the tick. Well, then they win the game because they've captured the objective better than the blue team. And understanding this is really helpful, because then you can understand why people are playing in the positions that they are playing in. Okay, so because we understand now that the attackers want to go all the way through here and attack the objective, then we can understand where people are going to play and why. So the defenders are going to play in positions where they can put on as much pressure onto the attackers as possible, and I'll explain pressure in just a moment. Okay, so you can understand. Okay, so these guys are going to play up here, so that they can use their cooldowns onto the attackers to get, ult charge, try and force out the enemy cooldowns, stuff like that, as early as possible, right? There's a reason that they're not playing all the way, back here in second point, because if they play there, then they're going to let the attacking team walk forward for free, and then they're just going to win. Okay, now let me explain to you a concept called space, okay? Now, space is a very, widespread topic in the Overwatch community, like, rightfully so, because it's very important to understand. But I'm going to simplify it in a way that where it's like it would take an idiot to not understand it. But luckily, you're not going to be an idiot for too much longer because you're watching this video. Okay? So we need to understand that there's kind of 3 types of space. So number 1, we have the friendly space. Okay? And the friendly space, I don't think that's how you spell friend. I'm going to be honest. Is that how you spell friend? No, that is. Okay. So we have the friendly space, which is going to be mainly characterized by where you and your team is standing, because where you and your team are standing, imagine the best way to define space is, imagine if this Ashe suddenly went from here and she TP'd right here, right? Do you think she would live for like very long, or like do you think she would have to use a bunch of cooldowns and probably not get out? Well, obviously the Ashe is going to die very quickly. Why? Because she's in our space. We don't have to use resources. Which again, I'll explain that. We don't have to use our resources in order to kill her. We just kill her very quickly, and then she's thrown. And we can define this friendly space as kind of this, right? So anything behind this line is our space. Now, it's not because the Ryan is here, or like because he's on Ryan. It's just because specifically he's here, I'm here, Moira's here, Anna's here, Widow's here. So we don't really get to control any more than like this space over here. I'm just making sure you can see it on the webcam. We don't control any more than this space because none of us are positioned over here. Okay, so if this is friendly space, then you can imagine that this is going to be enemy space, right? Now you don't need to overthink it. Okay, enemy space and friendly space, it's the same thing. It's just, this over here on the left would be enemy space if I was on the enemy team. Okay, like does that make sense? Like, don't overcomplicate it. This is kind of their space, or should I say, like this is their space over here, because they are standing over here, right? Does that make sense? And then we have a third type of space, which is just going to be neutral space, right? Neutral space is just where no one is. Okay, so let me mark some neutral space. Like over here is neutral space because it's kind of in the middle of us, but no one is really there, right? So like if someone took this angle, these guys are gonna get like put in trouble. But if one of these guys takes this angle, then these guys are gonna get put in trouble. And let me back up just a little bit. Okay, so now if I flip the map here, right, we still have the same space over here. This is our space, the friendly space, and then this is kind of the enemy space, right? But the neutral space is going to be things like over here, maybe the high ground, but the enemies have more easy access to the high ground, so technically it's their space, right? Things like the hotel, technically it's neutral space, but who can reach it faster? Probably the enemy, so it's probably going to be their space, right? You can see how it's kind of like tricky with neutral space, but you can say for sure that this back staircase is definitely neutral space, because it takes an equal amount of effort to reach it, if a little bit less for the enemies here. Okay, so now that you understand what space is, okay, remember when I said the attackers want to take the objective and the defenders want to stop them, right? Well, how do the attackers get through the enemies and to the point? Well, they take space, right? They need to walk from here to over here. But how do they do that? Well, I'm going to show that to you, okay? Be patient. Okay, so there's going to be a lot happening on the screen, but I want you to try and focus on just a couple of things that I'm speaking about, okay? So the attackers want to walk forward and take space. Why? Because each bit of space they take means they're going to get closer to the objective. But obviously, it's going to get harder as they get closer to the objective, because the map kind of becomes a little bit more defender favored. Now on King's Row specifically, obviously as attackers, you might understand you want to take hotel, you want to take this top bit, you want to take this bit, you want to use this. Once you have all, there's a lot of stuff that we can talk about, but I just want to be very general. Okay, so pay attention to how we walk forward here. Okay. So the Ryan is walking forward because these guys playing over here are not shooting, okay? Or like they are shooting, but it's easy for him to walk forward and take space because he's got a lot of HP, okay? And like you can see, we're slowly inching forward. I'm shooting, which means these guys are all going to back up. And if these guys are not looking down here, well then we could just walk forward for free and start trying to take a little bit more space. And like you can see, my Ryan, he tried to take a bit of space, but now their Ryan's forcing him back, so now he's got to go back. I'm going to explain how all of this works in a second, okay? Now, our Ryan gets a pretty decent pin. I die because I'm a fat child. But like, you can see how we've gone from tank over here, and like I'll be back here. So now we have all of this space, okay? We have like all of this. This is our space. This is the enemy space, right? We've gone from having no space to taking space. How? By pushing past corners, dealing damage. I'm gonna explain it. I know you're like, oh my god, Kai, none of this makes sense. I'm gonna explain it to you, but you need to see it visually first, or else it's not gonna make any sense. And then I'm gonna have to slap you because you're not paying attention. Okay? So we just keep fighting, and like you can see, like we're just shooting each other. We're not really like fighting. We're just using cooldowns. We're shooting. We're waiting, and like you can see, Brian and Genji are over here. They're taking space, and these guys haven't really stopped us from doing this, right? So we are currently at a pretty decent advantage. The Ryan goes forward. He tries to take some space to try and make a play. He gets pinned back, and then obviously we have to reset because he almost died. Now I want you to pay attention to me here, okay? So you can see that the Genji and the Ryan are currently contesting this space, right? Because they're kind of they're in the enemy space, but they're not in the space. They're just kind of like on the verge of like off the line here, right? It's like our space, their space. They're like kind of in like the middle part where it's like, well, we need to fight for the corner and we can't really avoid it. So it's just something that they have to do. But watch me, okay? Can't move my mouse. Okay. So watch me. I coach gun up top. What does this do? Well, I've taken some space. I've taken this high ground, because before you could say that really the space we had was kind of just this, right? Because we didn't have the high ground. But then because I jumped up and I took the high ground, we now took a little bit more space. And this high ground specifically is going to allow me to shoot at the enemies over here. Right? And then what does this do? It forces all of these guys to hide behind cover. And from this POV, them being over here means that the Ryan can only play so far out. Okay? Because before, the Ryan could play over here. But that was before his supports got forced out from over here and now have to go over here. So now the Ryan is not going to get the resources he needs to sustain himself to fight on this corner. So now he's got to back up, which is going to give our team space, because initially the Genji and the Ryan were fighting here, but then the line of space backs up, and now our team can take a little more space, right? Do you understand how it works to take control of space? And now we're going to keep watching me, okay? We're going to keep watching me. You see how I shoot? And then because this space is uncontested, right? This is neutral space. No one is playing here. I can continue walking over here, taking more space, which means now I've got a really good off angle, which I'll explain in a second. I have a really good off angle, which is going to make the enemies have to either look at me or my team, or more commonly what people do, they will put themselves in a position that dodges one of you. Either they dodge your team, which in this case they do by standing here and shooting me, or they dodge me, which you'll see they do by backing up. Why? Because they don't necessarily want to fight me. And then you can see the one person who doesn't back up, Juno, she dies. Why? Because while she is playing in what it's not really friendly space anymore, but because she's playing in an angle that I have, because I took more space than the enemies took, she's now in a really bad spot where there's a crossfire, or she's in a kill box. Kill box is just a term for like an imaginary kind of space on the map where there's multiple crossfires, right? Me and the Genji are looking in like from multiple different angles, which then creates a kill box, which means the Juno is basically guaranteed to die. Now, let me show you how the defenders were actually able to clutch up this fight, even though I had really good space. Okay, so like you can kind of see it all already, but the Ashe decided, okay, instead of playing this angle, I need to force the Ashe out of this space because it gives her too strong of an angle. So what does the Ashe and the Bastion do as well? They decide that I'm more dangerous to the team than these guys, which means they are now going to go to clear me. Now the mistake that I made was that I overextended and I forced myself to play a little bit too far away. Now, I did get the Bastion killed, but because I'm dead, you can see that the Ashe now has the same angle that I do, and she's doing the same thing that me and Genji did to the Juno, right? It's kind of creating a little bit of a crossfire or a kill box. Ashe is up here. She can shoot from down here. The Ryan and the Kiriko are over here. Granted, they're not going to be able to shoot as well, but in this situation, I think we lose this fight. Because the Ashe just has better space than the Reinhardt. Or, sorry. The Ashe has, like, better angle control because she's taken space against me, which has given her the angle in order to kill the Moira and the Ana. Okay, so now I want to explain probably the most important thing in Overwatch. And that's what I'm going to call the resource game, okay? The resource game, mark my words, is the most important thing to understand in Overwatch. You can't see the R because my face cam is blocking it. I'm trying to find the right button to press, but it's just none of it's working, so fuck me, right? The resource game is the most important thing that you can understand about Overwatch. Now, what is the resource game? Well, first, we have to understand what resources are. Resources, I shouldn't write that. Resources are just a few things. One, our cooldowns, okay? Number two, ammo, because you know we have a limited amount of ammo. Obviously, we have unlimited ammo, but in a given clip, we only have so much ammo. You know, Ana only has so many shots before she has to reload. Ashe only has so many shots. Mei only has so much ammo, right? Number three, we have our ults, right? Our ults are just big cooldowns, basically. They're just way stronger cooldowns. And then number four is our HP. All of these things are resources, okay, that we are going to be using to trade for the enemy resources. And if we play better than them, if we trade better than the enemies, that should result in them giving space by backing up, because if they stay forward, they're going to lose that resource trade so that we can walk forward and take more space, okay? I'll reiterate. The resource game is about trading our cooldowns, ammo, ults, and HP, hopefully and preferably more efficiently than the enemies trade our resources. And the team that does that better is very often going to be the team that is allowed to walk forward against the enemy team who is going to have to walk back. And I'm going to show you this clip here. Okay, so you can see that you can see where the enemies are. Okay, so you know the enemies are here. Pay attention to the fact that that we're shooting the enemy shield and that he has to back up, right? So he doesn't want to play here. One, because he's down an Ashe, right? He's down his teammate who's in spawn. So naturally, they're already at a resource disadvantage. So it's going to be really easy for us to just have more resources than them. So even if they get a good trade, we are still going to have more than them, okay? But I'll keep letting the clip play out, right? So me and Genji have to back up and get our own resources back, which is going to be our HP. Why? Because we traded with some of their resources. We lost some, right? So they used ammo to trade so they traded ammo for our resource, which is health, which means we now have to back up and stop shooting for a moment because we need to get healed, which is in the resource from Ana. The Ryan has to shield because he doesn't want to take too much damage, but he's also using his shield resource. Can you see how everything's a resource, and you want to be very efficient, okay? Right? But the Ryan having his shield get broke here, it's not the worst thing in the world, right? Because can regen. It's a good resource to take damage. And now you can see, because me and the Genji were briefly not in the fight because we're over here, and in fact none of us are shooting, right? So currently it's a 1v3 where all of these guys can just shoot into the Ryan, but the Ryan can't shoot into them. And he's at a resource disadvantage. Why? Because of his character's kit, right? He has shield, he has fire strike, and he has, you know, his charge, right? None of these are really going to help him at currently forcing out any of the resources from them. So the best thing that he can do right now is actually just play behind the corner and wait for his team to get back. And now because my team, and like me as well, we're not putting pressure on the enemies are allowed to take space. You see how the Ryan walked from over here to over here? Because now there's no resources being put into him. Let's continue, right? So, and obviously on the front line, especially Ryan v Ryan, a lot of the resources from the tanks and the supports and even the DPS are initially going to be put into the other tanks, because this is going to force them to either get off the corner or back up, right? And then you see when my team comes back, we are putting a lot of resources into the enemy Ryan shield, which means eventually he is going to have to back up, which I'll show you here. Right? Because his shield is running out, because we're putting way more resources into his shield than their team is putting into our shield, he now has to back up because he cannot stand in the open. I didn't explain this. I don't know why. When you don't have resources, okay, especially things like, you know, shields, you know, bubbles, you know, things that mitigate damage. Think tank cooldowns, think, you know, stuff that eats damage. When we don't have this, we're going to start to lose HP, and our HP is way more valuable of a resource than our cooldowns, you know, most of the time, because our HP is going to require a support or both of them to look at us, which means their resources are being taken away from our DPS or the enemies, and you can see how that kind of snowballs, right? So when we're in open space and we have our resources, it's okay, because that's the point of the resources. We are meant to use them to allow us to take space and walk through open space so that we don't get immediately shot and die. But if we don't have these shields and these bubbles, we have to be careful playing in open space, because we're going to lose a bunch of HP. We're going to go down to 200, 100 health, and then we're going to have to get healed. And then supports are not going to be healing DPS, and then DPS can't take angles. And then because the DPS can't take angles, they're going to be using less resources than us, and then we're just going to win space. Okay. I apologize if I'm talking a bit fast and a bit furious. Okay. Let's get back into the game. So because the Ryan is currently waiting for his shield to run out or to recharge, he now has to play this corner because he doesn't want to get shot at by all of these guys. But because he's backed up and given space, because we've put resources into him, we can now take space. The Ryan can take this angle, and then we can have this angle. This is an off angle, right? Now they have to worry about two different directions. Okay, and like you see how the resources are currently getting split into two different directions. You know, technically, his health is being used because we're shooting him, and he's trying to use fire strikes on here. It's a very hard thing to deal with. So how do they win this fight? Well, I don't think they do. The Ryan used his ult, which is a big resource that just have like special effects and do a lot of damage or do a lot of healing or do CC. The Ryan used the shatter to CC his their Ryan because he's in open space, which means he's an easy target for the shatter. But also conversely, which is pretty funny, because the Genji was looking at the Ryan here, the Ashe was able to use her own damage to kill the Genji. I just want to preface, okay? We want to, or like re-explain, we want to use our resources, mainly our ammo, and you know, cooldowns that do damage mostly, okay? We want to use these things so that we can pressure the enemies to either force them to back up, you know, disengage, give space, or utilize their own resources so that they can sustain in a certain position. But usually that doesn't work very well, right? Because a Ryan who wants to stay here is now going to have to use his shield, but we're going to shoot the shield, and it's only going to extend how long he can actually play there for. Okay, now I'd like to specifically talk about the ultimates, okay? Because ults are just another resource, but they are very strong. Now, look at the top here. Given the scenario, because the enemies have more ultimate economy than us, and ultimate economy is just, okay, what else do people have? right? Because they have this many and we have this many. Do you think we are likely to win the next fight? Well, on paper, probably not. But there is something that we might be able to do that helps us win the fight. But unfortunately, our Mora gets shattered, and I also get killed on the high ground. So no, we lose. Right? We just lose the fight because they simply have more resources than us, and that's something that's going to happen, right? And that's fine. So now we're gonna come back. We're gonna start pressuring, and like you can see, also like it's not just us pressuring. The Ashe is pressuring, and then because the Ashe is pressuring, she's able to get a kill. Now I want to talk about something called win conditions. Now this is something that someone specifically asked me to talk about. And I'm going to be honest, they don't actually apply probably in the way that you expected them to. Now, a win condition is just like, what can a team do in order to increase the chances of winning? Or what is a specific thing that is going to be like the most optimal play, okay? And usually people talk about win conditions when people have ults. Why? Because they're big things that can actually be played around, right? So for example, just as a complete example, the enemy supports have Rush and Ray. These are two really strong ults, and they also have Blizzard. But they kind of depend on the enemy team walking up and getting baited into taking that fight. But what if the win condition in this fight was literally play super aggressive and super fast, bait them, okay? Bait them to pop, the Rush or the Ray or even the Blizzard, and then either die fast, so like the fight's just over with in like 10 seconds, or because you've baited it, you can now kite out and then come back in after the ult. That's technically a win condition. It's something we can do to increase the chances of us winning the fight. Or specifically, a win condition could be, okay, we have Nanoblade. That's just a win condition. Why? Because that resource of putting Blade and Nano together basically overpowers every single resource in the entire game, and it basically guarantees a fight. So that's a win condition. But I don't like talking about win conditions in that way. The way I like to talk about win conditions is like, okay, what can you as a player do to make it more easy for your team to win? So I'm going to show you through this fight what I did to make this fight a lot easier and how I opened up my own win condition. Also quickly, I'd just like to show you, this is really funny that I said this. So what I said earlier about, oh yeah, we can walk in, bait out the ults. Well, look what happens. My Ryan walks in, the Mei walls him, and then because she thinks that he's freezable, she pops the ultimate on him, and then you can see, because he's baited the ult, he just gets out. So they've just committed that massive resource to try and kill our Ryan, which is a valid strat. But because the Ryan was ready for it, because he baited it, he's now able to pin out. And then because their Ryan makes a mistake and pins into open space, my Ryan is able to shatter him. And now we're actually at a pretty good advantage because now they're gonna have to use a lot of resources into winning this. And that brings me back into the win conditions, okay? So you shouldn't always think about win conditions as like, okay, what ult do we need to force out? How can I outplay this ult? How can I do this thing? Because it's important, but you want to think about the things that you can do very often in your game. And one of these things is taking off angles and distracting people, or taking off angles to capitalize on distracted people, okay? Now let's spectate me, okay? So my Ryan has shattered, and now because their Ryan is shattered, all of the support's resources, which is their ammo and potentially a Suzu, have to go over here. So ammo, cooldowns, attention is technically a resource, but I don't count it, right? All of their stuff has to go over here, right? The Ashe is shooting this, the Mei is shooting this. So that is going to allow me to take an off angle, which I know I've said I'll explain multiple times, but I really will. It's just really important to get this through your head, your idiot head. But you're technically a genius now, okay? So now my win condition is to try and get a pick or a really big cooldown trade by capitalizing on the fact that they're all looking at my Ryan. And then you can see the win condition is, all of these guys are distracted. Let me kill someone. And Killing Ashe is especially good as a win condition. Why? Because of the particular map we're on. I'd say Ashe is probably the strongest. Why? Because she can utilize her coach gun to take really good angles on these high grounds, and the range of the map and the linear kind of nature of the map really helps Ashe to win. So us killing Ashe puts us at a major advantage, right? Just specifically because of what she can do with her kit. And this is also a good example of how using ults can kind of help us to bait out other ults, bait out big cooldowns, make people look at us, make people back up, because ults are really strong. And if they're followed up on, right, like this shatter probably should have been, or like it was, right, but like the Ryan could have died here, but he didn't, right? Because it's such a big ult and they need to keep the tank up, because if the tank dies, they're going to lose a lot of resources. They have to focus on this. They can't afford to put their resources anywhere else, because if they do, their Ryan dies, and then we just win, because they have no tank, they have no Ashe, easy win. Which means they have to play in open space, which lets other people kill them. So Kai, you've explained space and the objective and the resource trade game and ultimates and stuff, but how do we actually like use this information to our advantage? Now I'm going to explain to you some key fundamental concepts that that are going to really help you understand like how to utilize these things. So the first concept I have is LOS, or line of sight. I'm not going to write the full word, you know what that means. So line of sight in like this way just means, okay, so we want to minimize how many people have LOS on us at any given time, right? Because if we shot, like, you know, generally, right, we don't have to follow that rule all the time if we use the other fundamentals that I'm going to teach you. But generally, we want to try and keep our LOS to one person at a time. Why? Because we don't want multiple people putting their resources into us, right? Just like, think about it. If there's an Ashe and we're playing Ashe and we're both looking at each other, right? Well, a 1v1, it's fine, right? A 1v1 is cool. But if we try and take a 1v1, also I just realized you can't see the LOS up here. But if I try and take a 1v2, or like I try and shoot the Ashe up here, but there's actually an Ashe and a Kiriko and a Genji looking at me, well then that's not really fair. That's multiple people who have LOS on me. So generally, you want to try and keep the LOS that other people have on you down to a very minimum. Now, how do we do this? Well, by taking off angles, using high grounds, playing your correct range, but I'm going to be explaining all these things in just a sec. So, like, even here, for example, okay? So right now, I currently have LOS on, where is my mouse? I have LOS on Juno and Ryan. This is great. None of them are already looking at me. But obviously, on King's Road, there is two spawns. There's this spawn and this spawn. And if I stay here, then it's going to allow the Ashe to also have LOS on me, which is going to create that crossfire situation that I've mentioned a while back on First Point. So what do you think I do actually? Let me ask you. I want you to be the genius that I know you can be. What do you think I did in order to stop to allow myself to still shoot people without opening the line of sight to multiple people? Hint: it involves my coach gun. Yeah, exactly. I use my coach gun to take this high ground, because what this does, and you'll see it, it still allows me to have the same line of sight here, but the Ashe can no longer see me. So I'm putting out the same amount of value, but I'm putting myself under less pressure by not allowing the Ashe to put her resources into me. Now, yeah, it lets her put resources into my team, but because she's shooting my Ryan, does it really matter? Because my Ryan has more health than my Anna or me, so it's kind of better if she shoots him than if she shoots me. And that brings me to the second thing, high grounds, okay? You can't see that behind my webcam, like I'm gonna fucking kill myself. Okay, so number 2, high grounds, right? High grounds are really good because they give you cover, they give you angles, they stop people having LOS on you. It basically, it just puts you in a very strong position. I don't know how else to say it, but let me find like a normal way to say it, right? High grounds give you cover that are way better than normal cover, because you can still have angles on other people, but if you play here, they can see you. But if you just back up a little bit, you can still keep the high ground, but you can use the floor as cover. And it's also basically a corner that is really hard to reach, and I'll explain what a corner is after this specific clip. And like you can see, the high ground allows me to use my resources generally, you know, fear-free because I know no one can really do anything about me, right? Like, I've got no fear. I can use my bob, I can use my dynamite, and I don't really have to think about my positioning that much. And then look, you can see when the Ashe turns to look at me because she realizes she's going to get a better resource trade on me than she's my team, or, you know, maybe she didn't realize that. Maybe she just wanted to shoot me because I'm the only one left. Then you see how I just back away. But I can still utilize the high ground in order to re-peak. That's why high grounds can be really strong. But they're only good, right? High grounds are only good if they allow you to still see the enemies, okay? That's one caveat I really need you to understand. If you're sitting on high ground and you cannot see anyone, or you're not at least contesting that space to stop people from getting there, it's useless. Do not play on the high ground. Okay, now I want to talk about number 3, which is going to be corners. And corners are kind of how each map is segmented by space. So I'm going to let a couple of seconds roll out, and then I'm going to explain what I mean. Okay, so the fight has progressed to a point where the Malga has reached the statue, okay? Now, this statue is an obstacle that both of the tanks can use as a corner. Now, what is a corner? A corner is literally just something that separates 2 lines of sight, okay? So we have this line of sight, like this is a line of sight, and then this is a line of sight, okay? And if both people were standing over here and over here, and they tried to see each other, well, they can't. Why? Because there's a thing in the way, which means the corner over here is how they're actually going to be able to see and peek. But what does this mean for us? Corners are everywhere on the map connected to open space. And like, I can show you basically anywhere on the map, but I'm just going to use King's Row as an example. So there's a corner over here, right? Because it's going to separate this big open space with this little open space, right? If you're standing here, no one in this open space can see you unless they open peek and shoot you here, okay? And let me get rid of all of it. Now, I'm going to let the video play out because it's going to make the most sense, right? So, now, the Malga has crossed the corner. So now he's the one looking into this open space. Whereas before, it was the Ryan, right? Who was the one who was able to peek back and forth, right? But now, the Ryan backs up. For whatever reason, maybe he wants to stop this. I die because I'm a fat chard. But now the Malga peeks past the corner, and he's able to shoot all of the people who are in an open space. And then this is the important part. So when you're in an open space and you start taking a lot of damage, you start losing resources. Where do you want to go? Well, to cover, to the corner. This is the point of a corner. So you play in open space for like a little bit because you want to hold space, you want to do damage, whatever, right? Whatever you're doing, it happens in open space for whatever reason. So then you go back to the corner to live, right? Because like the Ryan was initially playing in this open space. But when the Malga pushed and forced him into here, he had to back up and get to the next corner. Why? Because he doesn't want to play in open space because he's going to get beamed down because of the resource trade that the enemies are going to be able to put onto his shield, right? And then if we get pushed out even further, well then he's going to back up and he's going to go to another corner so that he can keep living. Now why does he back up to go to each corner? Because if he stays, he dies. If he backs up, he gives space, but he lives, and now he can go for another play, right? Okay, and that is going to lead me on to my next concept. So corners, I feel like I may not have explained it the best, but basically this is a bit of a better situation. Let me move my camera just a little bit here. There we go. Okay, so a corner is just this, and it separates 2 open spaces. Okay, you understand? Idealistically, you would just want to be sat on a corner and avoid the open space so that you can peek and shoot people in open space, which is going to lead me on to my next concept, which is L shapes. Now, I'm not going to take credit for this. I learned this specifically from A10. He doesn't upload anymore. I think he's still just private coaching, but I'm not sure. And L shapes are something that he taught me that, like, not he specifically, but you know what I mean. So imagine each corner, okay, is like an L, and like you can kind of see it every time I draw it. So L, there, like there's a little doorway here. There's a little doorway here, right on the bottom. I don't know if you can see it. There's a corner here, you know, and it's all these L shapes. Now we have the short side and the long side. The short side is where you stand here and you can kind of jiggle peek and look all the way down into the open space, okay? this is probably the best position to be in because it allows you to actually choose when you want to peek and choose when you want to use your resources. And it also limits how many resources you get forced out, how many resources people put into you. Why? Because the LOS on you is going to be a lot harder because you're going to be jiggle peeking this corner. And if you do end up taking damage and you need to get healed, instead of dying out here, you can actually just go to the corner, to the L shape or the short side of the L, and then live. And the long side of the L is essentially as you're walking through this open space specifically, you are now on the long side, right? The disadvantage of this is that you're in open space. You're going to take a lot of damage from a lot of different angles if people are using their corners, right? You know, the short side. You know, the Orisa, for example, can use the short side of the L here in order to you know, stop taking damage immediately, but the Mauga can't do that because he's on the far side of the L. And like you can see, he has to wide peek us whilst he's in open space. Okay, and like you see the soldier here. I'm trying not to move my mouse because it messes up the drawing. But like you can see, the soldier's in the long side of the L, which means he's in open space. And like it's kind of weird when people are playing so far away from the corner. We're kind of both on the long side of the L, which is really bad. But like you can kind of see how it kind of flips, like who's on the long side, who's on the short side, based on whoever's kind of closer to the corner, like physically, right? And like you can see, people can shoot past the corner, but they can also go behind the cover if they need to. And now you can see my Orisa is very visibly playing the short side here. Okay, when she goes here, she's now playing the short side, which means she can shoot the Mauga very, very easily and then go behind cover if she needs to. Right, boom, easy. But the Mauga takes a lot longer to reach the cover than the Orisa. And then this is going to bring me onto a concept called corner flipping as well, which is kind of like a hidden part of L shapes. But like, again, you see here, right? Like the Mauga's having a really tough time walking through this open space because we're all using the short side where we can just shoot him for free and he takes a lot more damage than he does to us. Right? And then he has to run away and go to the next corner. Why? Because we've pressured him so much, he now has to give space or else he dies. Can you see how this all kind of comes together? Because we pressured him out earlier, he has to use cardiac overdrive. And then when he uses cardiac overdrive, when it's over, he can no longer play very aggressively because that's the cooldown he can use to actually sustain himself. So then when he realizes that we are now taking space, why are we now taking space? Because he's given it, because he was low HP and he had no cardiac overdrive, so we can take space, right? And then when he takes space, that means he has to back up to the next corner because you see how he was playing this corner here, right? Because initially he wanted to push this, he failed, so he backs up to this corner. But then when he realizes we're taking space and he's still low, he goes all the way back and then he goes to the next corner. And now he's going to use this corner to play and set up for him, right? So can you kind of, are you understanding how corners, L shapes, all of this comes together in order to help you put pressure on people? And this is going to bring me on to the final concept that we have to talk about today. And it's very simple, just a choke. So I think this is number 5. I don't fucking remember, man. Number 5 is just a choke. Now a choke is basically an area of the map where people have to walk through and it's really thin and there's no cover, right? So it's really small, right? And as you can see, very, very small area compared to this big area. And usually there is no cover, okay? And number 3, the angles are very like sided, like defender sided, basically, right? The angles are very defender sided, right? Because one guy can stand here, one guy can stand here, one guy can stand here, one guy can be in the back on the corner, like looking in here. But the only places the enemies can stand are here, right? Like there's nowhere for them to stand. So they're going to take a fuck ton of damage as they try and come through, but they're not going to be able to do as much damage to us. Why? Because they have to look in separate angles. And like you can see, because the soldier's standing in open space inside of a choke, he just dies immediately, right? And then look, because now we have more resources than them, the Orisa now goes up to take the next corner, right? To take as much space as possible away from the attackers, so they have a harder time trying to get in to take the objective. And then you can see, right? Because now technically the Orisa is in the long side, right? The Orisa is the one walking in the choke, and now she's the one in the long side, okay? The Mauga and the Ashe and the Juno, they're in cover. They can jiggle peek if they want. But the Orisa to do damage, she has to walk all the way over here just to get LOS of these guys. But she's in this open space, which means she's going to take a lot more damage than she's going to be able to do to them. And then, you know, you can initially see what happens, right? She shoots, but then because she's getting exposed to multiple different angles, because she's in the choke now, the choke's technically on their side, even though we're on defense, you know, it's kind of stupid. She, like she gets discorded, she has to use Fortify, she has to use our support's resources to get healed. And then that's it. That's a resource trade right there, boom. And now, if they chose to engage her now, the Orisa wouldn't have Fortify and they might have a chance of winning. Now, how do you beat chokes? Well, you just do what I did right here, but, you know, flip it around. So, like, imagine, you know, the choke was like, okay, we want to get through here for whatever reason. I don't know, right? Imagine we wanted to get through onto this angle, but instead of barreling it all down this angle, because obviously, as I explained, line of sight, line of sight, line of sight, line of sight, we get shit on. So, if there are separate angles from choke, I highly recommend you utilize them, right? Because this is going to create an off angle, meaning that instead of looking at the choke, the Ashe now has to look up here. Maybe the Juno does, and then maybe the Zen and the Maga keep looking in the choke. This separates the team's attention, meaning there's two looking over here and two looking over here in two different locations, instead of all four looking down this way, making it really hard to walk in. And obviously, you also want to use any flank angles you have as well. So obviously, there's a flank angle on this side where, like, you know, if you're playing Tracer or Sombra, you can go over here to get besides the enemies to make them look at you. There's also this flank angle up here where, like, you can go over here, and then it opens up the rest of the second point for you over here, and where you can, you know, I don't know who you would do this as, maybe like a Venture. Right, you can jump up, get over here, run all the way down here, and now you're in a position to where you can flank the enemies. Okay, and that's how you beat chokes, because you're not really going to be able to brute force a choke by just all going in the same angle. Okay, so now I just want to talk about a couple of key skills that every player needs in order to kind of succeed in Overwatch 2. So we've gone through the mindset and kind of the understanding of how we actually win in Overwatch. But to win in Overwatch, we need some key skills, or in other words, fundamentals. That's not how you spell it. So F-N-D-A-M-E-N-T-A-L. You can't read that because my handwriting is awesome, but it doesn't matter because you're gaining knowledge. So I'd say the 3 key skills that are the most important, and there are more, and I go more in depth on that in my Overwatch Mastery Blueprint. But the 3 key skills you need are uptime, off angles, and like understanding when to do them, and cover usage. I'd say these 3 are like your chef's kiss. Okay, so let me take you through them one by one. Uptime is less of a skill, or like it's like half a skill and half a mindset compared to the other 2, which are like actual skills. Okay, it's like half skill and then half a mindset. So uptime is just doing as much damage pressure as possible. The reason why we want to have as much damage pressure as possible is because we want to be the ones who are doing our best to force out enemy resources as much as possible. Because think about it, if we shoot, you know, only 50% of the match's Ashe, well, we're missing out on the other 50% where we could have potentially forced out a cooldown, got on a kill, forced out an ultimate, right? And the idea of uptime is that if we shoot so much and we get so much damage, we're rarely going to miss opportunities where we should have shot people. Okay, and the way you implement this is it kind of depends on the hero. So on most heroes, excluding tank, which I'll explain in a sec. So most DPS and most supports are gonna wildly benefit from figuring out what positions you can play in order to do as much damage, and when you need it on supports, as much healing as possible. Why? Because damage is going to be the thing that takes away health, cooldowns, resources from, you know, other people, like supports and, you know, cooldowns that help people live. You're gonna force out these cooldowns, and like we said in the resource game part, we want to do more of this than we want them to do to us. And then healing, obviously, we want to have a good bit of uptime on healing, because this is how we're going to restore our teammates' health and stuff, right? So as most DPS and supports, we really want to prioritize just having as much uptime as possible, because that's how we're going to be able to pressure people as much as possible. Now, there are some heroes, okay, there are some heroes like, you know, Reaper or Kiri or, you know, Genji in some cases, or, you know, heroes that kind of play better waiting for the enemies to walk into their space or them rotating to space where they can take angles, okay, then shooting all of the time. And understanding when you need to do this, well, it typically, like, it generally comes down to, is your hero shorter ranged, and does your hero have more mobility than like the average hero, right? Because heroes like Soldier, Ashe, Soldier, and Widow, they they have more range than, you know, these heroes, but typically, I'm not saying they always do, but typically less mobility, which means you're going to be able to be more able to have uptime because you're not going to have to move as often. But these heroes, it's flipped. They have less range and more mobility, which means they can actually set themselves up in a position, wait for their team to engage, and then engage, because these heroes have spikes of value, right? You know, they have spike or like peaks, and then times where they have to wait, where they have to have some downtime, which I explained in my Overwatch Mastery Blueprint. Other heroes, like, you know, hit scans, are going to have more consistent value. And then sometimes with their cooldowns, it might spike a little bit. And then sometimes with their cooldowns, it might spike a little bit. But generally, it's very consistent value, and we can just keep shooting. Now, for tanks, it's going to be a bit different. So consider like two kind of categories of tanks. We have like the dive tanks, like Doom, Doomfist, Bull, Winston, Diva, you know, all these heroes that have high movement and low range. These heroes are going to play similarly to the DPS and supports that I kind of mentioned in here, plus a few others, where they kind of benefit more from setting up. That looks like OnlyFans. So they're going to benefit more from setting up and maybe diving people, and like not necessarily shooting all the time. But the other tanks, just, you know, Zarya, Queen, Ryan, they can benefit more from having more uptime. But the difference is with tanks in general, so like all of the tanks, is that they're going to have naturally less uptime. Why do you think that is, right? Well, the tanks are going to get shot at more, right? The tanks shoot more at tank, which means they're going to be under a lot more pressure, which means that they're not going to actually be able to physically play as often, right? Because they need to, you know, get HP back so that they can engage again. They need to get their cooldowns back. They need to let their DPS and supports take angles so that they can support them in taking space and getting active. But if you have all of these things, like it's hard to say, because as you get higher up in the ranks, tank play does change a little bit. But generally, you can having uptime shooting, and then when you don't have cooldowns, get out. Now, the way tanks play specifically, I'll just explain two tanks, okay? So Junker Queen, the way you want to play her is you want to have as much uptime as possible with her shotgun, her knife, and her Carnage. Because these are low effort, low resource abilities that are going to allow you to force out enemy resources. And then, when you force out those resources and you can capitalize on that because they're in open space, whatever the fuck, right? Then you use your shout, because shout is your big, long cooldown. It's like 12 seconds, right? Big, long cooldown. Then we only use shout to engage and have uptime. But most of the time, we're going to be using shotgun, knife, and Carnage to force out those cooldowns. And then obviously, if we don't have shout or if we're low on HP, then we hide behind a wall and we have some downtime. Like with Zarya, we're going to use our bubbles at the start of the fight to try and get some charge, or before the fight to get some charge. And then we're going to play pretty conservative with bubbles, and we're going to try and just use our beam and our right click to force out enemy cooldowns and stuff. And then when we can capitalize on enemies having no cooldowns or being out of position, then we can use our bubbles and our charge, which we should have from before the fight, in order to walk forward and kill them. Okay, so tanks are a little bit different. Now, let me talk about off angles. Now, I've got multiple videos about off angles, so I'm not going to go fully in depth. I also am going to be talking about them in my blueprint. But basically, off angles it's basically the win condition of all time, because off angles mean that you are going to be able to create separate angles to shoot the enemies from, and like even flanks, which are off angles, right? Which means, as I kind of explained sometimes in the video, there's going to be so many angles around the enemies that they're going to be forced to either go onto someone and just fight them, like try and hold their shield and live, or they're going to have to back up because there's just so much pressure on them. They die, right? So yeah, I'm not going to go too in depth about off angles. And same thing with cover. Cover is another key skill, or understanding how to use cover is a very key skill. So we want to be close to cover when we need it. When do we need it? When we have low HP, when we have no cooldowns, when we have no ammo, and and like when we're waiting, okay, when we have downtime. The reason why we want cover is to just stop ourselves from taking any more unnecessary pressure than we need to, especially if we're already low HP. Let's say we're playing Roadhog, right, and we're really low health. There's no point staying in the open. Just walk behind some cover like this, and then boom, or walk behind the cover, boom, you're safe. You can get your health back. You can wait for your cooldowns to come back. Because if you used all of your breather and your hook, you're not really going to get as much value. You can reload behind a wall without getting shot at, and you could just sit there and chill and wait. This is especially helpful on tanks. Okay, so these are kind of like the 3 skills that are super important for players, right? Uptime, so that you can understand how to put on pressure, how to win the resource trade. Off angles are super powerful in order to help you actually capitalize on this resource trade actively happening, so that you can catch enemies off guard or to distract enemies for your team. And then being able to use cover well is really helpful in order to stop yourself from being a victim to off angles and uptime. And now, if you've watched all of this video through, you have now officially gone from an idiot to a genius, and you can now take this knowledge from the video that you've just watched into the video game that you're going to play and start implementing it. And if you would like help kind of learning more information about the game and getting help to actually implement all of this, check out the top link in the description. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace. I know I didn't go too in depth onto off angles. It's simply just because I've already got so many videos about off angles, and I'm going to be honest, I've spent a long time making this video. But if you'd like personal help actually understanding how to utilize off angles as your character, check out the top link in the description. But if you want something for free, you can check out these videos. I think all of them kind of describe how to use off angles a lot better. I'm also going to be making, obviously, a fuck ton more videos this year in Overwatch, just because I'm on that content grind. I want to help as many people rank up as possible. And I really appreciate you if you stuck around all the way to the end of this video. I'll have the links for all 3 of these videos in the description underneath my paid product. And I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.